Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Megan and today I'm going to be doing A Series of Unfortunate Events book talk. If you've noticed, my location's changed. I have moved. I now live with my boyfriend and our dog. This is Oliver. Say hi. Can you say hi to the camera? So if you see him kind of floating around, Oliver's very interested in reading. Oliver loves being by my side, so I figure if he shows up in the videos, people won't mind too much. So before I get into this video, I do want to link you guys to another video, so I'm going to put it on the screen somewhere. I did my 10 reasons why I think you should read this book series. It doesn't contain any spoilers, so if you're about to watch this video and you have not read A Series of Unfortunate Events, I recommend that you stop and head over to that video instead. I will be discussing some spoilers of this book, just because it's inevitable when I'm talking about all 13 of them that I'm going to be giving some stuff away. So if you haven't seen that video, please click over there. Even if you have read the book series and you're looking to kind of hear my thoughts on it, I do recommend watching that video as well because it gives you kind of some insight into why I love this series so much. So I'm going to give you guys a second to click on that before I get started. Alright, hopefully you guys clicked on that and I'm going to get started now. So to begin, I have mentioned before, if you've been watching my previous videos, that it did take me 15 years to read this book series. I would start, I would stop, I would tell myself I needed to restart from the beginning and start again. So I have read the first, I want to say 6 or 7 books at least 10 times. So I know those books really well. The farthest I ever got before this read-through was to book 10. I stopped after The Slippery Slope, before The Grim Grotto. So that's as far as I'd ever gone, and so that was as much information as I had. And I can't really explain why I never read all the way through besides the fact that I think that I was scared, which sounds a little silly, but I was just really nervous that because of how this book series is set up that, there are no happy endings, it's a series of unfortunate events, that I would get to the end and I would feel like I had wasted all this time. Only to find, ultimately, in the end, that I loved it, that this ending was perfect in my opinion, and I just really enjoyed this series, but I do want to talk about it with you guys. So when I first read the ending, the chapter 14 ending, so hopefully you know this, that there is actually technically a book 14, and it's hidden at the end of book 13. So if you don't go all the way to the end, you may not know about it. I did, because I read the end of it, and I saw the editor note that said the end is at the end of the end, and I was like, why is there still like a solid 20 pages back here? There's something going on. And of course, there was a hidden chapter there that some people refer to as book 14. So once I got to the end of the real end of it, the end of chapter 14, I kind of sat there confused. I was satisfied, but I still didn't really understand why we didn't get answers to so many of our questions. So then I read the unauthorized autobiography, which came out with book 10, and it clicked. Everything made sense to me. What I'm about to state is, my own opinion. I'm sure I'm not the first person to think of it. However, I have not read any other, sources getting this idea. So I apologize if I don't credit someone who already completely explained this. However, this story is not the story of the Baudelaire orphans. And if you read it that way, when you get to the end, you're going to be very confused and very disappointed. If you read the companion guide, you know that Lemony Snicket is engaged to Beatrice Baudelaire. So they are supposed to be married. And then, things kind of get crazy with VFD, and Lemony Snicket is sent off on a boat, and he is sent away from the entire world, and he's hidden away, and this book series starts when he returns. He returns, and he wants to find out what happened to the love of his life. He wants to find out what happened to his siblings, and that is how we are introduced to the Baudelaire story, because he has to figure out what happened to them in order to find out what happened to his own family. And so when you read it that way, the ending makes total sense. He's learned what happened to Beatrice. He knows what happened to his sister. He knows what happened to his brother. He doesn't need to know what happened to the Baudelaires in the end in order to find the answer he was looking for. And the series of unfortunate events is his story, not the Baudelaires. And so when you read it that way, it makes more sense. And so that makes me now want to go back and read it in that light. I started to pick up on this idea while I was reading the book because there was so many things that were just hinted in there. That first off, you know, the introduction to Beatrice every time I just thought was interesting. Who is Beatrice? You know, why is it being written to her? And then, you know, there was the hidden letter to Kit in book 10. Yeah, I think it was book 10. And that was kind of interesting. Why would this be hidden in there? And, you know, just the focus on the Snicket file. And I started to realize that, you know, this story was bigger than just what it seemed. So ultimately, you know, let me know your thoughts on that. I think if you read it from the perspective of this is not their story and you're not looking for their answers, you're looking for his answer, you realize you do get that at the end. We do not get the end of the Baudelaire's answers, you know. Then that's going to be my next thing that I kind of want to discuss, is there are so many unanswered questions at the end of this series. And again, when you know that you're not meant to know the answers, it's a little understandable. However, I'm just like, what happened? Like, number one, what is in the sugar bowl? Why is it so important? You know, why do they need it so badly? Number two, you know, the Baudelaires are off on this island for a year. What in the world is happening in the real world? You know, VFD is basically completely destroyed. Every safe place that is left is gone. So when they left, there were no safe places in the world. So what happened? You know, what happens now that Dewey's dead? He was the file keeper. Is there a new one? Does anyone know about it? Is there any more records? Has everything just fallen apart? You know, there's just so many questions that you don't get the answer to. And, you know, I don't think we will, unless the Netflix series, you know, tends to pursue that a little bit more. But I think they were questions that weren't meant to be answered, unfortunately. And ultimately, I guess it's kind of explained with the idea of the great unknown, the big submarine question mark that's introduced in the Grim Grotto, and is ultimately said to have taken pretty much everyone else at the end of, you know, book 13, you know, the Quagmire triplets, Fiona and her brother. There's just, you know, what happened to them? I want to know these things. Like, are they okay? Were they reunited? I mean, they were, we know that. But for how long, you know? Just all of these different characters that were introduced to that I just want to know what happened to them. What happens to Mr. Poe? What happens to, you know, Jerome Squalor? Like, who made it out of the Hotel Denouement, you know? I'm sorry. There's so many questions that I just wish we could know the answer to. But when you know that it's not their story, you know, there's no way he could have explained all of those answers to us, and probably had it feel as satisfying. And so I just really appreciated those little subtle hints that, you know, became more and more apparent as you got deeper into the series, that we weren't going to get all of our answers, and that it was okay that we weren't, because the ending was still going to be satisfying. So once I started to discover those things that I definitely didn't see the first couple of times I read this series, I felt more confident as I got towards the ending that I wouldn't be disappointed. However, one thing I did not see coming was how important each of the characters we met was going to be to this story. You know, I thought each Guardian was, you know, important for the book that they were in. I did not realize that we were going to see them at the end. I had no idea that Justice Strauss would come back in book 12 and be so vital to the story. The idea of JS, the fact that I did not figure out that it was two people and I had no, like, oh, I am so mad at myself for not picking up on that, but I also, at the same time, I was really appreciative because I was so shocked. And the fact that the Hook-Handed Man and Fiona are related, and that we find Quigley in book 10, you know, all of these things that you're introduced to and you think is a one-off thing and then find out towards the end, you know, that they were important, makes me, again, want to go back and reread this series with this new information. You know, it was very exciting to read it the first time and kind of be shocked by all these things, but now I'm really interested to go back and reread it and find out how many hints were hidden in there. Overall, I just feel the reuse of characters was really clever and unconventional and not something I've seen in a lot of other series. Typically when a character pops up in a series again, I had a feeling it would happen. And in this series, it happened so many times that I was not prepared for. So that was really exciting to me. Another thing I want to talk about is how the adults in this book series are just so seemingly useless. I mean, the very few adults that we see that seem to be worth anything end up dying. So it's just like, what is going on? So I mean, yes, you suspend your disbelief, but near the end of the series, you start to learn that some of these adults weren't as useless as you thought. Like Jerome Squalor, who had the chance to save them in book 6, ends up coming back and he's been fighting. Same thing with Justice Strauss, book 1. They've been trying. And the big question is Mr. Poe. Like, what in the world is wrong with Mr. Poe? And to me, it's hinted towards the end that Mr. Poe might not be an upstanding citizen like he appears. Just, you know, he has good intentions, but it doesn't always work out. He might not be the best guy. You know, Count Olaf mentions that he's been involved in something before, and he just makes a very offhand comment about, yes, it was Mr. Poe, but I believe he was using his stage name at that time. And so it's just clear that we don't know the background of all of these characters as well as it may seem that we do. And Mr. Poe might very well be on the other side of the schism. He may not have the Baudelaire's best interest at heart. As long as he's in control of this fortune, he gets to ultimately decide where it goes. And it seems that he wants to keep it in the Baudelaire orphans' you know, grasp, but he may not. So it's interesting to see that the adults in this story, they add so much to it, but there's so much more they could have done. But in the end, in the long run, you realize that they did all that they could, or all that they were willing to do. It's just an interesting thing to look at. Another really interesting part of this book series to look at is kind of the debate that there's no true, you know, true inherent evil and true inherent good, that we all have mixes of both, because towards the end of the book series, somewhere around, I want to say book 8, the Baudelaires start to question their own morality, you know, what they're willing to do in order to make sure that they're safe. And they're really conflicted as, you know, young children committing some of these acts and kind of, you know, burning some bridges. Not trying to make a pun, but they do some questionable things, and it's clear that, you know, some of the people on the other side of the VFD schism might be feeling the same exact thing. They're just doing what's best for themselves and their family. And for the longest time, I thought it was going to be revealed in the end that the Baudelaire orphans were actually the evil ones, and that Count Olaf was only doing good, which I'm so thankful that was not the ending that came to be. But there was a lot of times where I was questioning, you know, is everything as it seems? Are the good guys good and are the bad guys bad? And while yes, in the end, for the most part, the bad guys are bad, but there's a lot of stuff that we just don't know. There's a lot of things, and when kind of a fight breaks out, it's hard to say whose side is good and whose side is bad. And one of the biggest questions is, you know, the Baudelaire orphans' parents seem to have been the ones who murdered Count Olaf's parents. And that's not something that's really, you know, developed, but it's something that is definitely defined for us. Though it isn't confirmed all of the way. It could be, you know, more than one person can use poison darts, so it's not confirmed that they were the ones, but it's hinted that it could have been them. You know, so what made Count Olaf an orphan? And who really set the fire in the Baudelaire orphans' home? Because it seems like it wasn't Count Olaf, ultimately. So there's just all these questions of, you know, there's more than meets the eye. There's no true good and no true evil. We all have mixes of, you know, both in us, and it just is up to us to control our actions and really know at the end of the day what our intentions are, if they're good or bad. And lastly, so, you know, that's kind of my overall thoughts on this book. You know, there were so many interesting things about it that I never saw coming, and if you watch my other video, you can really understand why I love this book series so much and why I think everyone should read it. But overall, it was just very well written. It was very well planned out. I would love to read it again and see all the little nuances that I missed, because I just think that Daniel Handler, you know, who is Lemony Snicket, wrote so many beautiful things into this story that we missed, that we intentionally are supposed to miss, and would need to read it more than one time to really pick up on it. So there's just so many little things that he did that I really appreciate, that I'm really excited to see, you know, come to life in this Netflix series. They're talking about how it's going to be much darker, how they've cast the actors young so they can use them for quite a while without them aging out, which was one of the biggest problems that happened in the movies. Also with the movies, you cannot tell 13 stories adequately in several movies, you know. They really do need 2 episodes per book in order to get the true nature of this story and to get all of these little details. So I'm very excited to see what they do with it. So If you're wondering ultimately what my rating of this book is, as you guys know, I don't do stars. I like to kind of come up with things that are related to the book series. So I would give this book 5 out of 5 eyes. I cannot say enough, and I'm probably biased because I'm so attached to this book series that I am probably overlooking some of the negative parts of it, but it's really hard for me to pinpoint something besides the fact that all the questions aren't answered, but I don't think they were meant to be, so that's okay. It's okay to kind of be able to think about things, and that's one of my favorite parts about reading, when a story makes me think once it's finished. You know, I like having these discussions with other people and trying to interpret things for ourselves. It's just really fun to me. So I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I would love to know what you think. Please leave me a comment below. Find me on Twitter, Instagram. You know, send me some sort of message. I would love to talk to people about this because I don't know very many people who've read these series. I need people who have read this so that I can have, you know, kind of an intelligent, informed conversation about this and not ruin anything for anyone. So that's it. You know, the conclusion of my 15-year journey with the series of unfortunate events. I hope, you know, your journey is just as much fun as mine was, and I'll be seeing you in my next video. Bye!